Hello and welcome to NPA Disvary, the home of true stories that go far beyond the headlines. If you're new here, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, because every click fuels our mission to bring you the stories that shaped history and continue to inspire us today. Today's episode is about a woman whose voice shook the walls of political apathy, whose courage redefined protest, and whose influence extends from music festivals to the halls of the White House. We're talking about the one and only Joan Baez. She's more than just a singer. She's a folk icon, a fearless activist, and a woman who never backed down from the fight for justice, even when it meant standing alone. But the question we're exploring today is deeper than her discography. What does it truly mean to live a life committed to peace, truth, and resistance? And how does someone like Joan Baez, with all her convictions, navigate heartbreak, betrayal, war zones, and global fame? I believe that Joan Baez lived a life that is not only extraordinary, but instructive. Her journey tells us something about how music can change the world, and how it can save a person's soul. Let's begin. The unlikely roots of a legend. Joan Baez was born on January 9, 1941, in Staten Island, New York. Her lineage combined the deep thought of science with the solemn devotion of religion. Her father, Albert Baez, was a physicist who co-invented the X-ray microscope. Her grandfathers were a Catholic priest and a Protestant minister. In a household where molecules and morality mingled over dinner, it's no wonder Joan was born with a conscience, and a curiosity. But unlike her scientific and spiritual roots, Joan's early life didn't point toward a career in music. It pointed toward discomfort, discrimination, and a growing sense of social injustice. The Baez family had Mexican ancestry on her father's side. In post-war America, being of mixed ethnicity came with a price. Joan's experience of prejudice in California was both painful and formative. It wasn't just personal, it was political. She saw how society treated the other. And from an early age, she decided she wouldn't accept it. Her family joined the Quakers, a faith that emphasized pacifism, equality, and truth. These values would follow Joan Baez her entire life. They wouldn't just shape her beliefs, they would become the foundation of her actions. The first protest, silence as power. In high school, Baez staged her first act of civil disobedience. During an air raid drill, standard Cold War-era procedure, students were ordered to evacuate. Joan didn't budge. She remained seated, silently rejecting the ritual of fear. This wasn't just teenage rebellion. It was a spiritual conviction. Joan believed in nonviolence, and she couldn't pretend otherwise, not even for a drill. Many great activists don't start with rallies. They start with a moment, one small act of saying no when everyone else says yes. For Joan, that moment happened in a classroom. And it was only the beginning. A voice that echoed beyond the stage. Following her breakout at Newport, Joan Baez quickly became the face of a new folk generation. Her voice, ethereal and unwavering, was not just entertainment. It was a statement. While other artists chased record deals and radio plays, Joan chased causes. She made it clear early on, she would not perform in segregated venues. In the Deep South, this meant turning down money and popularity. But Joan was never chasing applause, she was chasing justice. Instead of the mainstream Southern colleges that upheld Jim Crow laws, Joan chose to sing at historically black colleges. She performed for students who, like her, believed that change was possible, and that music could help lead the way. For many of those students, Joan's presence wasn't just inspiring, it was galvanizing. Her refusal to play segregated venues was a bold risk. But it sent a message: equality wasn't optional. It was the price of her art. Around this time, major record labels started circling. Columbia Records, one of the biggest in the world, was eager to sign her. But Joan turned them down. She signed with a smaller label, Vanguard Records, because they offered her something far more valuable than fame, freedom. Vanguard didn't try to shape her. They let her sing what she believed in, how she believed it should be sung. That decision set the tone for her entire career. Joan Baez would not be shaped by the industry, she would shape it. When it came time to record her debut album, she didn't step into a state-of-the-art studio. Vanguard booked a ballroom in Manhattan's hotel towers. The floors were covered in a worn carpet, and they had to avoid Wednesday nights because of bingo. But in just 4 days, with little more than 2 microphones and a vision, Joan Baez recorded one of the most hauntingly beautiful folk albums of her time. Some songs were done in a single take. Because for Joan, perfection wasn't the goal, honesty was. Rebirth in activism and a new kind of love. After the heartbreak with Dylan, Joan Baez didn't disappear into silence, she re-emerged with purpose. The pain fueled her activism. If Dylan had chosen a path of electric guitars and fame, Joan walked straight into the fire of resistance, unflinching and defiant. In 1967, during a protest against the Vietnam War, Joan and her mother were arrested for blocking the doors of the Armed Forces Induction Center in Oakland. But this was no ordinary protest. For Joan, it was the beginning of something unexpected. While separated from the male detainees, she met a young writer and draft resistor named David Harris. Their connection was immediate and intense. Baez, always drawn to men with principle, found in Harris a kindred spirit, someone who didn't just speak about peace, but lived it. They married and moved to a commune nestled in the Santa Clara Hills, devoting their lives to nonviolence and simplicity. Their idyll didn't last. In 1969, Harris was sentenced to prison for refusing military service. Baez, pregnant with their child, watched as her husband was taken away. A few months later, she gave birth to their son Gabriel, alone. For Joan, this was a moment of profound transformation. She was no longer just a singer or protester. She was a mother. And while the war raged on, she stood firm, performing at Woodstock while carrying the weight of personal sacrifice. It's easy to romanticize the 1960s, flowers, freedom, and festivals. But for Joan Baez, the era was marked by loneliness, jail cells, bomb shelters, and broken promises. And yet, she stood taller than ever. When Harris was released in 1971, the couple tried to make it work. But Joan had changed. She later said she was meant to live alone. Their marriage ended, but not in bitterness. It ended as many of her chapters did, with honesty. From Vietnam to the global stage, a voice against all wars. In 1972, Joan Baez received an invitation that very few American artists would dare to accept, an invitation from the Vietnamese Committee for Solidarity with the American people to visit Hanoi during the height of the Vietnam War. It was a trip that would test her courage, her convictions, and ultimately, her legacy. Joan wasn't just going to sing. She was going to bear witness. Christmas under bombs. Baez planned to spend Christmas in Hanoi. But instead of holiday cheer, she encountered horror. On Christmas Eve, as she sang the Lord's Prayer in a shelter, the sounds of bombs falling overhead cut through her voice. The United States had launched a devastating bombing campaign known as the Christmas bombings, dropping over 100,000 tons of explosives on North Vietnam. When Joan emerged from the shelter, the destruction was unimaginable. Rubble where homes once stood. Silence where laughter once lived. And everywhere, death and fear. This wasn't just a protest song or a symbolic gesture. Baez had placed herself in one of the most dangerous places on earth to stand in solidarity with victims of war, regardless of which side they were on. While many in the peace movement praised her visit, Baez did something few others had the courage to do: she criticized both governments. Upon returning to the United States, she took out full-page ads in major newspapers calling out human rights abuses not just by the American military, but by the North Vietnamese government as well. It was a stance that cost her dearly. Actress and fellow activist Jane Fonda, who had also visited Vietnam, took offense at Baez's criticism of the North. The two women, once friends, became estranged. Fonda believed that criticizing America's enemies during wartime weakened the anti-war message. Baez believed the truth should never be silenced, even when it's inconvenient. The rift was painful, but Baez stood her ground. To her, peace was never partisan. You cannot demand justice from one hand while turning a blind eye to injustice from the other. In this chapter of her life, Joan Baez reminded the world that true nonviolence means holding everyone accountable. Not just your enemies, but your allies too. She was willing to lose friends. Willing to risk her career. Willing to speak out when silence would have been far easier. And through it all, she never stopped singing. The legacy of a truth-teller, from music to memory. As the decades unfolded, Joan Baez's voice continued to evolve, not just musically, but morally. She sang through the civil rights movement, the anti-war era, and the feminist awakening. And when many artists faded into nostalgia, Joan found new causes, and new battles to fight. She was no longer just the barefoot girl with the crystalline voice. She became the wise elder of resistance, a woman who had earned her seat at the table through decades of service, sacrifice, and song. In 2017, at the age of 76, Joan Baez returned with her first original song in 27 years. It wasn't a love ballad or a retrospective reflection, it was a direct, fearless protest. The song was called "Nasty Man," a pointed rebuke of then-President Donald Trump. With humor, fury, and her signature clarity, Baez sang of resistance once more. And she did it where it all began, on her own terms, on her own platform, Facebook. This wasn't just nostalgia. It was proof that the fight for justice had never left her bones. That same year, Baez was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. For many, the honor felt overdue. But Joan, in typical fashion, used the spotlight not for self-congratulation, but to highlight the work still left to do. Her speech reminded the world that while her music had been a soundtrack to the struggles of the 20th century, those struggles had never truly ended. She urged younger generations to take the torch, to keep singing, marching, and showing up. It's easy to measure greatness in awards, record sales, or magazine covers. But Joan Baez's greatness is measured in something far deeper, in the tears she wiped from a jailed protester's cheek. In the voices she amplified when the world wasn't listening. In the moments she said the unpopular thing, because it was right. She didn't just perform history, she lived it. Shaped it. Challenged it. Joan Baez's story is not one of perfection. She has made mistakes. She has had feuds, heartbreaks, and losses. But every chapter of her life reflects an unshakable commitment to one thing, living with purpose. She never stood still. Never stayed silent. Never gave up. And as she steps into the twilight of her public life, Joan Baez leaves behind more than just music. She leaves behind a roadmap, a model for how to use your gifts not for glory, but for good. So, what does Joan Baez teach us? That truth matters, even when it costs you everything. That peace is not passive, it's an active, daily choice. That a single voice, raised with conviction, can change the world. In a time of division, Joan Baez remains a symbol of unity. In a world of noise, she gave us clarity. And in an age of silence, she dared to sing. Thank you for watching. If Joan's story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe. And let us know in the comments, what's your favorite Joan Baez moment, lyric, or legacy? Until next time, keep your voice strong, your heart open, and remember, the courage to sing the truth is always in tune.